Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, June 14th, and we are joined by our all-star panel of top local journalists. Joining us for the first time, Jack Magargee, who reports for The Independent, Josh Molina, man of many hats, and host of the global sensation podcast, Santa Barbara Talks, and Callie Fausey, who was nice enough to drop by on route to Maui to talk a little bit about what's been going on with schools. But I want to start with the biggest story of the week, which was the building occupation out at UCSB. Jack, you're working for the Independent while you're also still going to school out there, and walk us through your reporting on this. How did you find out what was going on, and how did you approach it? And just kind of walk us through the couple of days there.
Sure, yeah. So it started on Monday, Monday around 9:30 a.m. We knew that something was happening. The Arbor Walkway is directly parallel to Davidson Library, so whenever you're on campus, you can't miss anything that's happening. A normal school week looks like, clubs out there, people playing music or whatever. Monday was, obviously very different. As soon as I walk into the arbor. I saw banners hanging over Gervet's Hall with fake dead bodies kind of strewn all over the place, rubble everywhere, and red paint kind of covering the walkway. And so, you know, UCSB is kind of we're used to protests at this point. Over my 3 years, I've seen TA strike and all the pro-Palestine protests, but this was noticeably very different. And by 10:30 a.m., we knew that something was up. We knew that they had taken over Gervet's Hall, and nobody could get in. There were people outside chanting, people in black, masks and, concealing their identities, standing on top of the roof, with a megaphone, shouting at everybody. And then they opened up one of the classrooms. All the other ones were blocked off. They opened up a classroom, and inside were, more fake dead bodies. And it said "Say Genocide." Some of the banners, obviously saying some pro-Palestine stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was apparent, it was obvious, and kind of going about it. I found that the best way to do it is just to be there, talk to as many people as I could, talk to students who participated, talk to students who didn't participate, faculty, and just observe. That was the most obvious thing that I could do, and I don't know. I just reported what I saw, I guess.
Yeah, well, you've been covering the encampment too, and you mentioned before we started the recording that there had been this sort of gradual escalation of tactics. So this was not a complete surprise, or was it?
You know, it. I don't want to say it was a surprise. Just because I follow, national and state trends of escalation. And I think that the demonstrators also follow like geopolitical trends. So as the, Israel-Hamas war escalates and kind of, draws more media attention and political criticism, um, as well as, people keep dying. I think the demonstrators just felt they had no more recourse. They needed somebody to listen, or um, they needed to get their point across, more so than they had already done. The university has taken a very, hands-off approach to this whole situation, just kind of letting it go. But they couldn't ignore this. This was something that they needed to address. So yeah, I mean, I was surprised by what they did, but was I surprised that they did something so public? No. It
How'd
was
you, Now, when did the cops come, and how'd you find out about that?
So the cops came. They have a social media account. They had a couple of social media accounts, and they sent out videos of
The protesters, you mean?
the protesters. Excuse me. The sheriff's special enforcement bureau. They have armored vehicles, and we had seen them on campus probably around 10:30 p.m. And so there was an expectation that something was going to happen. But in my opinion, I thought, oh, okay, maybe only if there's like a larger demonstration would something happen. Um, and then, I left. I went home after sitting outside for about 2 hours waiting. And then around 1 a.m., a little bit before 1 a.m., I get a text from a friend who was at the library and he said, the police are coming. You should get here right now. Excuse me. And directly at 1 a.m., um, the UCSB sent out a campus-wide message, said there's a police operation happening at Gervets Hall, avoid the area. And by saying avoid the area, everybody goes to the area, right? And so I go and people there were the probably about 10 vehicles, including a canine unit, two, probably three armored vehicles, and probably about 50 to 60 police officers, UCPD, sheriff's deputies, canine unit, wearing full tactical gear, full riot gear. It was organized, official, um, and the protesters, demonstrators, they were right in their face. But then there were probably about
The,
400.
the ones that were outside were in their face.
Yeah, yeah. But there were probably about 300 to 400 students not participating, just watching, recording, and bystanders. There were, I would say, probably about 15 faculty members who were trying to de-escalate. So they were standing in solidarity with the pro-Palestine supporters, protesters. Um, and then, there was a few of us that I was just anxiously just taking as many notes as I could, like what the hell is happening. So it was crazy.
Well, you did a good job with it, I have to say, because it was really, up to the minute with what was going on. But I was a little surprised that the occupiers took off. I mean, they had a very hard line on this, that they weren't going to leave until the university made certain statements about genocide and so on. But they took off before the cops actually arrived, no?
Yeah, so they took off probably a couple hours before the cops arrived. I noticed that there was an open door into Gervets Hall, and I peeked my head in, and you could tell that the occupiers were up there because they were chanting. But at this point, it was probably about 10:30, 11. I didn't see anybody in the building, so I assumed that they had all left. I kind of thought that maybe they would stay and kind of stand for their cause, and get arrested for their cause, which I support in a lot of ways. Um, but it was nothing. People left, and it was kind of anticlimactic. I don't want to say that because there were police on campus and it was crazy, but it was a little anticlimactic. It was sort of like, okay, well, they're here now. They're going to go through the building and then that's it. So it was a little anticlimactic. I thought something else was going to happen.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you one more thing. You in your story, you said this. As the school year comes to an end, the image of law enforcement on UCSB's campus is one that students, faculty, and the campus community won't soon forget in a year that saw numerous protests, a short-lived academic worker strike, and uncertainty surrounding commencement ceremonies. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, do you think it's going to be sort of a radicalizing event that more people will now join that cause because of it, or what's your take on that?
No, Jerry, there was like, so during when they were occupying, it was Tuesday, and I was sitting outside just kind of watching, not even taking notes. And there were tours, prospective student tours walking on campus. And, right in the middle of the tours going on, a person with a megaphone says, UCSB and Henry Yang funds genocide. And in my head, I said, what is a prospective student going to think about UCSB? Because I love this university, I love this place, and to me, that was one of the most interesting paradoxes of it all. And with the law enforcement coming, there's a lot that's happened on UCSB's campus over these past 3 years and over the past 10 years, certainly. Um, but this was different. This was what's going to happen. What is this weird year that it's turned into? With commencement kind of flip-flopping, um, I just the image of armored vehicles coming onto campus and kind of these, student protesters exercising, maybe a very liberal interpretation of free speech. It was interesting. It was really, really interesting. And
So you
something,
think, this is not the end of the story when school starts again. You,
you know,
you,
I don't know. Next fall, who knows, right? There's a lot that people are still very upset about. The argument for disclosure and divestment from the military industrial complex is one that um, students and many faculty, grad students included, um, that's what they want. This is one of the biggest arguments is they demand UCSB disclose and divest their contracts. Um, but I don't know. I don't know if this is the end of more public demonstrations. I'm trying to get as many answers as I can from the university on these topics, but
well, I think your point is a good one that'll probably follow events.
yeah,
So who knows what's going to happen in Gaza by then. And so we'll see. All right. Good work. Callie, you and Josh and I have been egging, we're talking up this teacher strike at the Santa Barbara Unified School District that was going to take place. But suddenly you settled it. What happened this week?
Yeah, so this week was the fact-finding hearing between the school district and the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. And they came to a tentative agreement. The SBTA wanted a 15% salary increase next year and 8% the following year. The district only offered 9 and 4, and they settled at 10 and 5. So
Did that surprise you?
a little bit, actually. I mean, sort of not really. I think a lot of people are just exhausted at this point. Like the teacher who I spoke to at the rally said, all going to every school board meeting every other week and doing all these rallies, marches, and demonstrations, it's been exhausting. So I think both sides are feeling some real fatigue. So in that sense, no, I'm not surprised. But in the sense that they really were pushing for 15 and 8 and then to settle so much lower than what they had hoped for, that was a little bit surprising.
Well, the rank and file still has to approve the deal.
That's
Is
true.
that,
Yeah.
I mean, how's it being greeted? I would imagine, after all of the buildup, some people are disappointed.
It's not being greeted. I think I got a little bit too excited writing it in the morning. I was like, yay, it's settled. And I got emails saying like, this isn't settled yet. Like we were not happy with this agreement, like from multiple different teachers. And so I was like, I definitely jumped the gun on that one. Yeah. And the rank and file members do have to vote. So we will see how that works out. And it's going to be a simple majority. So they need 50% plus 1. So we'll see if 50% of the union.
Josh, what are you hearing?
Well, similar to Callie, I mean, I'll be a little stronger about it. And I mean, I think that the Teachers Association lost, and they've had such an incredible public relations effort. And these teachers have been there every 2 weeks. They were picketing 2 days in a row this week, Tuesday and Wednesday. So much energy and excitement. I mean, they're carrying signs that say strike ready. They voted, 95% of them voted, and 98% of those voted to strike if a deal was something they didn't agree with.
And those are big numbers.
And so much like how did the people leave, Gervais Hall, like there's that mystery. What happened in that room with the hearing and the two sides? Because somehow there was all this energy going in for we're going to strike if we don't get the 15 and 8. And then all of a sudden, Osby Galindo, who's a great guy and did an amazing job here, puts out a little statement in the morning, says we settled. But if you read it, it's like it was 10 and 5. So it's odd. And so what my sources have said was that basically in the meeting, this hearing officer said, you're never going to get this amount of money. The deal you've been offered is a great offer, and you better take it. And the
But they
bargaining
get to
team
write, the
accepted it.
hearing officer gets to write a report, correct?
Yes.
About, yeah. Okay.
And so the bargaining team accepts it, and now they're going to go to the membership and vote. So, I mean, it's if you're the district, you're like, we only had to pay 1% more this year and 1% next year. So that's a victory for them just on the numbers. So it's going to be interesting. There is fatigue. It's summer. People want to enjoy their summer. Will they vote to strike? Or I'm sorry, will they vote to accept this contract? Probably, but I know there's still a lot of teachers who are very disappointed. And I've gotten emails just like Callie. It's on social media as well. So, Jack mentioned sort of an anticlimactic outcome with what he covered. This is also anticlimactic in that, and I know as a reporter, and this is, I'll just say this real quickly, is because I've covered stuff for so long, I'm always really wary of buying into the emotions of the two sides during union negotiations, because at the end of the day, it's going to be an outcome that is not going to match the energy of those people who are protesting. And so that's exactly what happened here. It's like there's so much energy there. And then the statement comes out in the morning that says 10 and 5. And it's so far from what they were saying. I mean, Kelly was out there. I saw her. These teachers, like literally direct quotes are, we can't afford to live here and we are ready to strike. And so there's a bit of a disconnect there between what the bargaining team accepted and what, at least the teachers I talked to, which was a lot, how they feel. So we'll see. It might just be a thing of, hey, Hosby, you did a great job. The bargaining team, we're proud of the effort you made, and let's move on and maybe fight the battle again in 2 years. It might be something like that, but I don't know that it's like a done deal right now.
All right. Hey, Callie, I know you got a scoop, but before you go, let me just ask you, spinning it forward a little bit. First of all, when does this vote take place? When will we know whether they've accepted? And secondly, what is your sense about the teachers putting up challengers to the school board members with whom they've been very unhappy throughout?
So to answer your first question, I think I heard that it's June 18th is when they're going to be voting on this.
So next week.
Yeah. And, in the press release that Hosby Galindo put out, he had this quote saying like, this isn't over, we're going to work to elect school board members who are going to make a change in this district. And I don't know. I think it's hard for me to tell, especially because, I'm new to reporting on this district, and I think I'm still understanding all the mechanics of it. But I feel like as long as like Hilda Maldonado is out at the helm, I think that the school board members are kind of just going to be sort of in tow with her. I don't know. I think it would take a really, really strong-willed person to sit on that board and actually make, like, I guess, divert from the flock, if that makes sense.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Well, enjoy your time off, Callie. Well earned. You get very good timing, I have to say, on your trip away. You got this done, and you're out the door.
Yep. Settled the strike, and now I'm going on vacation.
All right. Thanks, Callie.
All
Hey,
right.
Jack, let me ask you, you mentioned earlier that there had been a strike at UCSB with some of the workers. What happened with that, and where does that stand?
So the UAW 4811 is the chapter that represents all the academic workers across the UC system. So that's about It's over 40,000, I want to say. My numbers might be wrong because they publicize different numbers. Anyways, so UAW 4811 approved a stand-up strike across the UC system. A stand-up strike is essentially when it's more rolling and gradual. Rather than last year's the COLA strike was okay, everybody strike at once at all 9 campuses. This one, the executive board could pick and choose who could go first. And so, I think it was UCLA and UC Santa Cruz were the first ones. So UCSB was chosen to strike about a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and but it was very short-lived. The UC filed a lawsuit, got a temporary restraining order from a judge in Orange County, where UC Irvine is, and now they're going to go to trial. So the union is going to go to court against the UC system to about the strike. So I've been covering that and how it kind of pertains to UCSB, but that is more kind of state news rather than more specific to Santa Barbara, I guess.
And then just to close the circle, you mentioned the commencement. Henry Yang was going to change the site of commencement and try to tamp that down, but he kind of folded on that. Speaking of anticlimax.
Yeah, yeah, people were up in arms. It was to go from the lagoon to the rec center where there's turf and it's going to be hot, and who wants to sit on turf for their college graduation? And I felt for these seniors because this was the same class that didn't have a graduation
Right,
because
missed their COVID
right,
graduation.
exactly. So some of it was on Zoom, but no, it was all about, and the university didn't tell me this, but I kind of expected it, that it was all about security. It was all about demonstrations and protests. So, they wanted to do it at the rec center, and then 2 petitions were created, and I got about probably over 11,000, 12,000 signatures in 24 hours. And I'm sure that Chancellor Yang and the rest of the administration was just getting attacked with emails and calls and all this stuff. And so they're like, all right, we're gonna go back to the
Never
lagoon.
mind.
Yeah, yeah, they just did. They went back to the lagoon. But if you go on campus now, and they've done it over the course of about a week or so, it's entirely barricaded. It looks like you would expect like the president, not the president, but somebody with real security was coming. It's fully barricaded. They have security walking around at all times. And so the first graduation ceremonies happened today. But I'm guessing that the bigger ones, so Saturday and Sunday, they're going to have major security. And as a member of the media, I don't know if you did this too, Josh, but I had to reach out to Kiki Reyes, the media relations manager, and ask for credentials to appear. So really, really wild stuff. Yeah.
So you're going to be covering it this weekend?
Yeah. I mean, coincidentally, I have a couple of friends that are graduating, so I can kill 2 birds with one stone. I can go see them graduate and keep my eye out for in case anything crazy happens.
All right. Hey, Josh, City Hall, they finally passed the budget, and they've agreed to put this half-cent sales tax proposal on the ballot. What was the final chapter of that looking like? Apparently, Alejandra Gutierrez, who is up for re-election, changed her vote.
Yeah, and she did it without explaining herself. So she's running for re-election in District 1 in Santa Barbara against Jet Black Mertz and Wendy Santa Maria. And so a couple weeks ago, Councilwoman Alejandra Gutierrez said she couldn't vote to put it on the ballot because she didn't agree with the survey, and that only something like 62 or 68 of her constituents were actually asked whether they would support this or not. So she felt as though there was a systemic problem with how the city's consultant surveyed people to see if they would support it. And so she voted against it. And then this week, she just voted to put it on the ballot with no explanation for her previous vote. So the real story is, for anyone who cares about such things, is that she's running in a very close competitive race in District 1 for re-election against a surging Wendy Santa Maria, who's got the endorsement of the Democratic Central Committee cause, and there's a lot of buzz around her campaign. She's a union organizer at UCSB, and she's previously had worked as a tenant advocate. And so she's very strong on those issues, very clearly defined, the messaging part, right? And she's running against Jet Black Merritt, who's also worked with homelessness and housing, is also a strong candidate, has Mary Rose, who of course ran Joan Hartman's campaign, and a million other people. And so very strong candidates. So Alejandra Gutierrez needs help because she had the Democratic Party endorsement 4 years ago. She didn't even go for an interview this time because she knew that Wendy was going to get it. Everyone sort of knew they really liked her. So she got the endorsement. So Alejandra needs support. And that support is going to come in the form of Santa Barbara Mayor Randy Rouse. And so Randy supports the sales tax. And he was under the impression a couple of weeks ago that she was going to vote to put it on the ballot because they want a unified message when the city does their campaign. The Santa Barbara City Council unanimously voted to support this. And then you would have had Alejandra as a no. Councilwoman Gutierrez needs help to get reelected. It is undeniable. And this is not a judgment of her. And like, I'm not saying people should not vote for her. I'm just saying, from a political analysis perspective, she's going up against Wendy Santa Maria and Jet Black Merritt. And there's people who support them as someone who's not the incumbent. And Randy does not want Wendy Santa Maria to get elected, because if she gets elected, she will be the fourth vote for rent control or rent stabilization, whatever you want to call it. And because Megan and Oscar and Kristen, Megan Harmon, Kristen Stead, and Oscar Gutierrez, and then Wendy Santa Maria would be the fourth. Randy does not want this. And so he's going to want Alejandra Gutierrez to get reelected because Alejandra Gutierrez is not for rent control. She has sided herself with the property owners, the small business, or the mom and pops and that sort of thing. And so that's what's really going on here. So there were conversations between a couple weeks ago and this week, and she all of a sudden decided to support it. And that's why journalists exist, by the way, to explain these things in context, because we have to hold them accountable. She's totally within her rights to change her vote, but I think people were like annoyed and upset that she didn't offer an explanation. Like, because she went on a long explanation 2 weeks ago about why she didn't like it, and then she just changed. And I think she owes it, And then on top of that, they did pass the budget, $557 million overall budget. They're not going to raise the parking fees. They're using some general fund money. They're using some Measure C money, and they're going to talk about what to do with parking, possibly moving it from an enterprise fund into the general fund permanently. That's to come, though.
Yeah, and the slip fees at the harbor. And because we do receive detailed critiques from the mayor after every show, which are only slightly longer than War and Peace, I do want to say for the record, he does not publicly endorse, I think, in local races, but as you say, maybe behind the scenes. All right, Jack, I just want to ask you one more thing before I let you go. How do you think Henry Ain comes out of this? He's the oldest chancellor. He's been around for a long time. He's got this, well-earned reputation that his hands are on everything, but his fingerprints are on nothing. He's, kind of done this rope-a-dope with the demonstrators. What's your view of how he's done?
I'm gonna put what he's done now within the context of what I've seen over the past 3 years. And I think the most, it's a great question. I have to think about what he did with like Dormzilla, right? So thinking about like what Munger Hall, right? and also the TA strike and all this stuff. I don't know. I think the university is kind of tired, right? I think the university we're tired. Students are tired of demonstrations. As Josh mentioned earlier, there's just some fatigue, There's some fatigue on the campus, and I wouldn't be surprised if UCSB was ready for a change. Not that I've heard anything. No, but I think he comes out okay, right? I think that there's certainly a group that is very, very upset with him. It's apparent. You can see it on the banners at the encampment. But then there are others that are, kind of more indifferent, ambivalent towards him. But me as a journalist, I I have to think that there's other things that he should be worrying about, and that's housing, new departments that might be incoming in the next year. Obviously, this is a more public, and it's certainly a blight on his tenure. But there's actual stuff that needs to be done on campus, and unfortunately, I'm not saying that the protests distract from it, but that takes a good chunk of his and the administration's attention. But there are actionable things that need to be done on campus, and hopefully he or maybe even somebody else can do those things. Housing being the most important.
All right, fair enough. Josh, who you got on a podcast?
Well, I'm going to talk to your good buddy, Jerry, Tom Widrow. So we're going to talk politics. We're going to talk about all the local stuff and
You
get his
a sort of a
conservative point of view.
center right perspective on things from there. I'm gonna take a wild guess that Tom is not in favor of the sales tax increase, but that's.
I don't know. I did a brief pre-conversation with him, but I didn't ask him his thoughts on that. He did have a lot of thoughts on what was happening at UCSB this week. I do. He's a grad of UCSB, so he did have some thoughts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Went to Gaucho, always a Gaucho. All right, fair enough. Jack Magargee, Josh Molina, and Callie Fausey in abstention. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time on Newsmakers.
Thanks, Jerry.